And just the truth is, like, you have to figure out what's right for you.
Mhm.
And just because you make one decision now doesn't mean that that has to be your decision forever. Like, you can always pivot and change and figure out what feels right for you at the moment.
Hi, you're listening to On the Cusp of 30, and I'm your host, Katie. Let's navigate the chaos of adulting together. Today, we'll be talking about entrepreneurship, how to have more clarity when creating your brand, work life balance tips, and manifesting your ideal clients. Joining me here today is my good friend Krystal. We met when I was working on my video business. You'll hear more about her inspirational journey building a thriving business and intentional life for herself. Let's chat. Crystal, I'm really excited to have you. Welcome. I'd love to have you introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Krystal Childrey, and I own an ads agency called Soulwave Digital. And we help e commerce brands in the health and wellness space scale with Facebook ads.
Wonderful. How many years have you been doing this?
So I've been in business about 3 years now, but I actually started off as a content writer, copywriter, and then transitioned into Facebook and Instagram ads about 6 months later. So actually, been managing Facebook and Instagram ads for probably 2.5 years.
It's been a wild journey, right?
It has been, yeah, it has
Yeah.
been the journey.
Over the years, we kind of talked a lot about it's really crazy how you started working in tech and then you made that huge transition. How was it in the very beginning to like transition out of, working your 9 to 5?
When I was working corporate, I was really, really burnt out. Obviously, I went to school for tech. That's like my whole background, and got a job right out of college. And I was in that space for about 7 years. And it really just ate away, honestly, at my mental health each and every day, to the point where I was waking up every morning before going to work with like a huge pit in my stomach, just like really dreading every day having to go
Yeah.
into that office. And that's when I knew I had to make a change. And it probably should have made that change earlier than I did looking back on it, because I stayed in that space for way too long. But I'm just fairly proud of myself for actually making the decision to, step out and do something on my own. But actually, when I left my corporate job, and it was actually right before the pandemic, I had no clue what my next steps were. I just knew I had to get out of there. And I wouldn't recommend that, obviously, for everyone. I'd saved up money to be able to do that and things like that. So it was like, there's obviously some risk involved, but I had made a calculated risk in that sense.
Right.
But
Right.
I took a few months just to kind of like get my mental health in place. So I was doing yoga every day, got my yoga teacher certification. So really trying to like meditate, figure out what I wanted to do with life. So I really just took a few months off to figure that out. And then it was probably I think 4-ish months later when I decided, hey, I'm ready to just try something new. And it's funny that I chose content writing, copywriting at the beginning. The point behind me choosing that was because I was so tired of dealing with people in the corporate world. Um, I dealt with some really frustrating people, and I really just wanted a job that I didn't have to associate with anyone. And it's so funny looking back on that now. Like, I just wanted a job where I was heads down, able to just do what I needed to do, hand it over to the client, and, continue working that way, not a lot of
Mhm.
interaction. But I quickly
Right.
found that that was not the right approach for me. And that's when I switched into
Mhm.
the Facebook and Instagram ads.
Right. You started pursuing this path, like it sounded like there was a lot of things that you were able to like fulfill, to be able to dictate your own time and like put
Right.
your energy and like things that projects that you really feel passionate about.
Exactly, like fulfillment, and then I also obviously want it to be my own boss and, like, dictate my own schedule and have flexibility in my days and kinda figure
Yeah.
out what that looks like for me rather than have someone else dictate that for me. So
Hmm.
that was a big part too in
Yeah.
starting my own business. It's like the
Hmm.
flexibility plus being more fulfilled and being able to work on projects that I actually care about. Like now I work with clients in the health and wellness space specifically and obviously e-com now, although I started with coaches and course creators. But I've been able to kind of like adjust and pivot as I needed to as I figured out like what was working and what isn't working. Like I'm not afraid to just make changes now, and I have that flexibility when something isn't working, whereas in corporate, you don't always have that kind of, like, flexibility to
Hmm.
work
Yeah.
on projects that you actually care about.
It's true. Like you can always pivot to if something's not working, you just say, well, I'm going to start trying something different. It's definitely going to be a lot easier when you're the boss.
Yeah.
I also just wanted to kind of dive in on branding and marketing with you. You've been working in this field, and it is really interesting when you start your own business and you find your like field, you find your focus. How do you, in terms of branding, it's like, how do you present yourself to the world? So I'd love to hear like kind of your thoughts on like how you went about it with your business and just like how can people make sure that their messaging is clear.
As far as, like, branding yourself, I think in the beginning, branding yourself is a lot harder because you're scrolling on social media and seeing what everyone else is posting out there and you have this image
Right.
of like how you should be or how you should present yourself and you always in the beginning seem to have this like expectation that you need to be perfect or you need to present yourself in a certain way and I think over time that evolves a little bit and I've just learned that the more authentic you can be in your branding and your marketing, the more you'll attract the people that are right for you and that like actually have your values and you'll really enjoy working with. I found that to be true. And I feel like, especially in 2023, that's what people are looking for is
Mhm.
more authenticity in branding and marketing.
How important do you feel like in the early stages of your business to be like focusing on things like brand colors, like overall messaging? Like what is your personal take on that? Do you feel like that's something that you should be trying to solidify in like the very beginning or after you start taking on clients?
Yeah, I personally went the route of like building my whole website out and making sure I had all the pieces in place before I started taking on clients. But to be honest, I don't feel like you need all of that. Like, you don't need to spend all of this time focusing on your brand colors and every single aspect. But I do think you need to have like your messaging down and who you want to speak to. You don't need a website or any of that to get started. I mean, the biggest thing is just start to make connections with people in the
Right.
industry, whether that's through Facebook groups or social media, Instagram, whatever that may be. It's just starting to make those connections and talk about what you do. But you're right in the sense that, like, you do have to have your messaging down and know who you want to like target and who you want to be talking to because you don't want to confuse people with that messaging. So I think like the thing I would say is most important is to have your messaging down, but you don't always need all of the extras. And you don't
Mhm.
need to be everywhere at once. Like just start with one thing. Like for example, I started with generating leads really through like Facebook groups, getting to know people in Facebook groups, building relationships, and then I would do connect calls every once in a while with people in the industry that maybe were doing services that were complementary to mine. So, for example, say like a website developer, they may work on that aspect for a client, and that client may also need work for ads in the future. So,
Mhm.
just like really networking and building that referral network up is how I kinda gain my first clients and kinda how I recommend doing it. Just get your brand messaging down and continue to network and build relationships with other people.
Mhm. I agree with what you're saying, especially about the part where like your community is like really important and like you don't have to be everywhere.
And I fully agree with that because you will probably burn yourself out. It's just tough, right? Because if you're starting off and you're like, it's just you, right? You feel like you need to be maybe everywhere, and you are also working in your business. You're actually providing the service or products. So there's just so many things to juggle. And on top of that, if you try to be on social media, like email marketing, you hear like everybody talk about like the benefits. You might be inclined to try it. And I don't think that it's wrong to like try that in the beginning, but then you start to narrow down what you might be better at. Like maybe you're better at showing up on your Instagram stories, right? Versus like drafting email newsletters. So that could be your point of entry.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And you see everyone when you're scrolling on social media, like you see people all over the place are posting every day. Like they're on all of these different channels. But something you don't always realize is that a lot of those people have teams that are working on the actual work behind the scenes. So they have the time to actually just commit to content creation. So a lot of the times that's something that you don't really like recognize when you're just seeing people all over the place, but they have that kind of time because they have invested in a team to do a lot of the like day-to-day work for them.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point too. So part of the topic that we were discussing is like marketing yourself in like 2023, but really just like in recent years, like where are people starting to show up more on? I know that at least from my industry, like video content has been like a huge thing, right? Especially with platforms like TikTok, where you can clearly see the impact. So many people are consuming video these days, right? And it's like mobile and it's short, and people have short attention spans. Really interesting when you look at like the platforms that people are on. And, sometimes if you have the time, you can like try and like integrate your brand, yourself into those platforms.
Yeah, it's very interesting because when did the pivot from like servicing mostly coaches and course creators to ecom brands, I was focused mostly on like Instagram and Facebook for coaches and course creators. But what I'm finding as I'm pivoting to ecom brands is that they put a lot of focus on Twitter and LinkedIn for leads. So I'm kind of like switching my strategy now to focusing on those platforms, which is really interesting because I feel like, things like TikTok and Instagram are typically what you think about, or Facebook, when you're first getting started, but just remembering that there are these other platforms out there as well that you can experiment with.
Right. That's a good point too. And it's like, um, you really have to figure out where your clients
Yeah.
are, right? Like if your client or your client's demographic, their products, they're not catered to what you would like a TikTok audience, then naturally you'd want to figure out where they are on.
Right.
So that's definitely a really good point. Something else that I was thinking about, work-life balance is something that you experience whether you're in a 9 to 5 or the owner of your business, right? I wanted to say, like, a lot of people have struggled here. I would love to hear how you navigate, like, creating that balance for yourself, because I do find it to be harder for a business owner. You dictate your schedule and you pretty much get to dictate all the activities that go within it. So, like, how have you gone about that?
The things that I have implemented into my schedule and my days to kind of have more of that balance has been, first off, like trying to do something in the morning so you're not constantly like waking up thinking about work. So even if that's like meditating for a few minutes before getting downstairs and starting to work, or, doing some yoga, some exercise, movement, just something in the morning that just like makes you feel good and like kind of sets your mood for the day. So that's one thing I would suggest. And then the other thing that I definitely have to make sure I do within my day is get outdoors and like take breaks, because it can be
I
so
love
easy
that.
to just get tied down in
Yeah,
constantly working, working,
right.
working. And a lot of times you start to focus on the like wrong things as well. For example, like obviously I own an ads agency. So one of the things that I can often find myself doing is spending way too much time just like viewing a client's ad account and like diving into the data and not getting a lot of the other things in my business that I need to like get done. So for example, like I will work a lot on the ad accounts and I don't spend as much time doing the marketing things for my business. So
Mhm.
working on my business versus in my business. So just making sure that I'm taking those breaks throughout the day to like reset and make sure I'm focusing on the right things. And then I also have to turn off distractions during my workday. Otherwise, that can be a real challenge. Like turning off my Slack notifications, making sure that I'm only checking my email like in the morning and the afternoon. So, just making sure I'm not getting caught up with like distractions from clients that are messaging me or emails, because that can definitely take away from time that I need to be doing something like a little more productive in my business. So just making sure you set aside specific times for those things. And then just time blocking in general can be helpful, like kind of planning out your day. And putting that on your calendar of like, I need to work these specific hours on this task and trying to stick with that. I don't necessarily always time block my day, but I at least have some kind of like agenda for the day of like, this is what I need to get done. And I'm looking at that list in the morning and kind of assessing where I am by the end of the day. I have a lot of resistance, I think, to time blocking just
Same.
because, yeah, I have so much resistance. And I think it comes from my corporate days of feeling like I have to be so freaking structured
Mhm.
and like it just makes me feel like my day can't be flexible. And
Yeah.
so I don't always like time block, but it can be helpful for some people to do
Right.
that.
For sure.
I think just having a plan for your day in general at the
Mhm.
very least will be helpful.
Yeah, I agree with having a plan for your day. It's funny because I have thoughts on time blocking. I have personally tried implementing that when I first started my video production business. It was the thought that, oh, I get to dictate all of these activities, so therefore I will be doing them because I'm the one putting it on my own calendar. But as I found out, it was very difficult to, at least personally for me, it was very difficult when you extreme time calendar block, which is like basically what it looks like is like your entire day is just packed with like multiple activities, all color coded. And it's like, so it works for some people, but it's not for everyone. If I miss one item on that calendar block, it just ruins my entire day because now I just feel like a failure because I totally did
Exactly.
not from 7 to 9 a.m. do the thing that I said I was going to do.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm the same way. And a lot of times even if I have something on my calendar, I'll like completely ignore like I'll be like, "Okay, I could just push that out and switch it with something else." And I just tend to like completely ignore what's on my calendar when I'm time blocking for some
Right.
reason. Like I don't know. It's just a weird thing that I
Yeah.
do is that I just
Right.
have so much resistance to having such a structured schedule
Right. Exactly.
that
And you did not leave 9 to 5 to be more to, to
right.
have to follow all these things again.
Exactly.
I was gonna add also things that are working for me. I loved your when you mentioned go outdoors, get some fresh air. I think that's been really crucial, especially if you have the flexibility of working from home. And that goes for if you're working 9 to 5 as well. What I've been pushing myself to do is like every time I feel like a little bit less productive, brain fog or whatever, I just force myself to like go outside. And once I am outside, like, that kind of gets things rolling and like, yeah, I'll do a walk or I'll do some stuff. And I always come back feeling at least a little bit better. Um,
Exactly, and more
right.
creative, I think.
And then I'll say I don't do this religiously, but weekly goals, because when you're like working on stuff like projects or whatever, like day to day, like what you're doing because you have a to-do list. But you sometimes lose track of what your goals actually are
Yeah,
because you're so in the weeds. And I
exactly,
think it
like,
can
you
be beneficial. to do like a weekly or like a monthly goals thing to just like help remind and make sure that you're on track.
Yeah, that's a really good point
Yeah.
because you can get bogged down in the weeds and kind of forget like high level, what am I even doing? Or like, what is
Mhm.
the future goal that I'm aiming towards?
Yeah. And I think it can also, I mean, it helps you set your priorities straight, right? And that's something that's just really important when you're working on projects. One thing that I do when I was working with clients is I will upfront let them know that my availability for client meetings is it used to be Tuesdays and Thursdays in the morning time. It helps because like, you know, you need to have time to work on your projects, right? And so like knowing that all the meetings are completed, you can just completely go heads down and focus on your own work.
Yeah, that's a really good point because whenever I do have meetings like earlier in the afternoon, I feel like I almost can't focus in the morning time on what I need to get
Mhm.
done because I'm just like thinking about like that one meeting that I have and is there anything else I need to prepare for it. So I'm very similar to you of like just like liking to have those meetings scheduled in the morning time.
Yeah. And I say like if you can, because I don't have the luxury of dictating my meetings anymore. But I still try to like I won't block off my entire calendar for a certain task, but I will have dedicated focus times, which are a little bit easier for me. It's just like I can just do a focus time of like 1 to 2 hours at any point during the day. And just like focus on what I need to get done. And if you give yourself like a smaller time frame, I mean, at least this works for me. Like it you might not get everything done during that time, but it really kickstart the process and it kind of forces you to like just finish it. I think it helps with my productivity, is what
Right.
I was trying to say. Lately, I know that you have been going through a transition in your business. In the past, you know, you were pretty much working on the business solo. And over time, you told me that you wanted to transition to an agency. So, can you walk me through why you wanted to do that?
Yeah, so I actually never planned to have an agency, to be honest with you. But I realized that in order to grow past a certain point, like I was going to need help. And I wanted to be able to focus more on the business instead of in the business because I wasn't finding a lot of time for, like we talked about earlier, branding and marketing myself. And I don't have goals to make this like a huge agency. I want to stay pretty like small and boutique and then add on additional services outside of done for your services, like maybe courses and consulting and things like that. But I kind of started off really slow with transitioning to an agency. I started off first with like just having someone to complete the design work for ads. And it took a few tries to kind of get that right and figure out who was the best freelancer to work with. So I think just like advice there is don't be afraid to like try multiple people to see what works best for your agency at the beginning. Like I had two freelancers that I kind of gave the same assignment to and then picked which one worked best for me from there. So I think just making sure that that person's going to be the right fit for you is a really important tip. Just make sure they fit the values of your company, like their communication style is very similar to yours, because that's a big thing. Making sure they're pretty communicative. And then from there, I started to hire a copywriter. So once I kind of got the design down and that was kind of in flow, then I started to bring on a copywriter who could create all of the ad copy for the accounts. And I always also recommend like getting recommendations from other people in the industry. Like again, it goes back to networking and like knowing different people in the industry who can recommend people that they've also worked with. So you have some kind of like trust going into that relationship of like, oh, this is probably going to be a good fit for me. Just having someone that's backed that person is really, really helpful to have as well. So a lot of the freelancers that I've hired have been from recommendations, which has helped like kind of cut down the time to kind of get that process going.
Okay, so I want to quickly transition to a conversation about how to establish credibility and navigating that conversation with your clients about offering new services.
Over the years, like as I have developed my skill set, grown in technical knowledge, like I want to get closer and closer to the projects that I want to be working on.
Yes.
And at the same time, like to build that credibility, like I find like having the social proof, having client testimonials has been like really beneficial.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, it's also been testimonials and then just like case studies of what I've done for other clients as far as like the ads management side, how much like revenue we've generated in a certain amount of time. So showing those case studies in a nice like PDF format has been helpful for clients, especially if they're like colder and haven't like been in my world for very long. Like sometimes they need that extra convincing. So that has been super helpful to have those case studies on hand. And that's something I'm kind of working through now as I transition from like working with course creators to working with econ brands. Is like a lot of my best case studies have been in that coaches course creator space. So now how do I transition and still show that I bring value in this new space?
Mhm.
It's been kind of difficult to figure that out, but that's something that I'm definitely working through as well. It's like how do I make that transition each time you make that pivot?
It's so easy to just like go back to what you're already good at and what you've already gotten good reviews on. When you're a small business and you're trying to offer a new service, sometimes it can be a little bit challenging to navigate that. Your prospective client might ask, well, can you show me your portfolio like of similar work that you've done in the past? But if this is new, then you obviously don't have that.
Like
It's just like, you got to trust me on this. I can do it.
I can do the work, just trust me.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly helps if like you already have an ongoing relationship with those clients and they
Right.
have already trust you enough to like, be able to succeed in something that is newer to you. But if it's like a completely net new client, then they may not be as receptive.
If a client directly asks me, "Do you have any experience in this
Mhm.
specific industry?" And I don't. Like, I'm very straightforward with them, but
Mhm.
I give them information on, like, what I have been doing to become competent in that specific industry, like, what kinda trainings I'm doing, what kinda, like, memberships I'm a part of, so
Mhm.
who I'm networking with, so, like, if something did come up while I was working on this specific project that I didn't know the answer to, like, I have people that I can go
Mhm.
to find
Right.
out those answers and figure it out. Like, I
Mhm.
have that support group there, but I think we do need more, like, just transparency and honesty in the industry, especially with ad agencies, because there's so many ad agencies out there that can talk the talk, but when it comes down to it, they don't know what the hell they're doing. And,
Mhm. Right.
a lot of clients are losing a lot of money because they're given this hope that, like, they're gonna make all of this money from investing in ads, and then, you know, that promise falls very short once they get into the partnership. So I think we
Mhm.
definitely need more of that honesty and transparency.
Yeah, I like what you said right there. We talked about some stuff about clients, and I wanted to ask what your ideal clients might look like.
Right. So one of the things with ads specifically that I didn't necessarily do a great job vetting in the beginning is like where they are in their business. Are they actually ready for this type of investment? And I don't think I asked enough questions in the beginning.
Mhm.
So, for example, like the clients that I work with now, I want them to be close to like a million in revenue a year. That way, I know that when we're starting ads, they have money to invest into them. And it's not that like spending $200 is going to make them like go bankrupt, right? Or like, into debt, more into debt. So, things like that are really important for me to vet on like a discovery call. So I want to work with those clients that are more established. They're at like $1 million in revenue per year. They're already making consistent sales in their business. They're making consistent revenue per month and they're just ready to scale that. Like they just
Mhm.
want more time back and they're ready to scale their business past that 7 and 8 figure mark. And then that's like my main offering, right? My ads management service. I really need to make sure place to invest in that. But then I also have like services that I can down sell to them if they're not quite in the place where they're ready to invest that type of money into ads. So I
Mhm.
think for me, like my ideal client obviously needs to be in the right place, more established in their
Right.
business, but also I want to make sure like they have the same values as me and like they prioritize like mental health and like respect my boundaries and things like that. So like
Mhm.
going into a relationship when I know a client is also on the same page as me around like communication styles, around like respecting my boundaries that I don't
Mhm.
work past like 4 p.m. on the
Right.
weekdays and I'm not going to be like responding to emails on weekends. Those are definitely things that
Mhm.
as I evolve in my business, I also like want to
Right.
make sure that I'm asking those questions and getting those answers before I take on a client.
Yeah, that's really important, not just in business, but in life, right?
Right.
Dating as well. I I fully agree with like those 2 points. The communication that you have with like an established client is like it tends to be direct and almost less frequent in
Right.
general than like someone who is like first starting out, right? Because
100%. a
right.
100%.
Yeah. And they'll just, have more questions. They'll be like worried about like certain like things
Yes.
financially because maybe they're not actually ready um to make that kind of investment. And it's just like a lot of those differences you start to observe.
Yeah, and I've even found like clients that are spending less on ads, right? Like they're spending maybe $2,000 on ads per month versus a client that's spending $50,000 on ads a month. You would think that $50,000 client is going to take more of your time because obviously that means more like creative that you need to like create for them. And that means more managing their account. Like you have
Right.
more campaigns and things like that. But the truth is that $2,000 client is often taking up more of my time than that $50,000 per month client just because they are constantly pinging me about different things or like, I'm giving them recommendations on their website to implement and I'm having to like constantly give them more recommendations of like what they need to do in their business to continue to move the needle forward and generate revenue. And some of those things are things that I should have made sure that they had before I
Mhm.
took them on as a client.
And I also think that this is kind of like tough to say as a blanket statement, but I believe like the similarity with video and ads is like, if you are like wanting to invest in video, and in the very beginning, at least my perspective is you may not even need to invest in video. Like you're on a very shoestring budget, like you're still trying to like work out your products and services, like that could be a good time for you to even start like DIYing like your content, just figuring out what works, what doesn't. And then when you are more established in your business and you finally realize like, okay, like I can be putting more energy into like video advertising and things of that nature, that's when I think it could be better for you to start looking into like video professionals, right? Who you can partner with to get your brand to like the next step to help scale your message.
People think that ads are going to just work after 1 month of putting them out there, and that's not
Mhm.
the truth. Like, it's a long-term game. Any marketing is,
Right.
right? So, totally agree with you there.
Yeah. And then the other point that you mentioned with like boundaries, it's really interesting because I think you also need to like you need to also, I guess, be the one to set those in the first
Mhm.
place, like know what you're comfortable with. Um and I guess like in terms of manifesting your ideal client, you have to first like figure out like what you need, right? And then communicate that to them clearly. Um One thing that I started doing was I would draft out this like client onboarding with like, when to contact me, suggested times to book a meeting or like my working hours. And I didn't do that in the very beginning. And, I would have people just like messaging me like late hours or on weekends. And it's partly because I didn't tell them, I didn't communicate my needs. And so I guess like it kind of helps like over time you figure out like, okay, I only, I feel productive when I have my meetings in the morning or just like little things like that.
Yeah, and then just, like, resisting the temptation to respond to clients when
Mhm.
they message you after hours, because that's something that in the beginning, I didn't do a great job of. If they responded to me at, say, 6 p.m., I would still see that pop up on my phone and answer them, and then they start to get in that cycle of, like, "This is okay to do," and
Right.
so it becomes
You've set that
worse and
precedent
worse over
that
time.
it's okay.
Yeah,
Right, that's
exactly.
true. So I guess apart from setting those boundaries in the first place, you have to stick to them,
Stick to
which is the
them.
hardest part.
Yes. Exactly.
Is because they're your clients, right? Like you want to ultimately you want to make them happy with your service, your product. So
Right.
that can be a tricky line or it can be a tricky thing to navigate if you're a people pleaser in your
Yes.
day-to-day life.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely something to consider. So I think to tie it back to the theme of the podcast, I think it would be fun for us to just reflect on our 20s. If you could talk to yourself from a few years ago, what would you say to her?
I think my number one piece of advice would be to trust your gut because there's been so many times I feel like in my 20s that whether it be relationships or career that I knew something was off or didn't feel right, but I didn't make that change that I knew I need to make. So, for example, I was obviously in a relationship in my early 20s that wasn't the right fit. And I knew that for several years. But actually, like getting out of that relationship and trusting my gut and believing that things could get better is very hard when you're used to doing something for so long or being in a
Mhm.
relationship for so long. It's very easy to get very comfortable with that kind of life and not believe that you can have something better. So that was one instance where like trusting my gut could have come into play and I could have exited that relationship before I did because unfortunately like that was 6 years of my life. And aside from the relationship also like in my career same kind of deal when I knew that being in the tech industry wasn't fulfilling me and I wasn't happy. I continued to, try to move up the corporate ladder in my tech career just because I felt like that was what everybody else expected me to do, or like that was the right way to approach my life instead of doing necessarily what makes me happy. And I feared a lot of what people would say if I did leave my job and start something completely new. So, like, that fear of judgment came into play a lot too. So, trying to like reframe that in my 20s of like not caring so much what people are going to think of you because people are always going to have opinions one way or the other. And there's always going to be some people that aren't your biggest fan. So, trying to like not care so much what people think about your decisions and doing what's best for you in the moment. And obviously, that played a role trusting my gut with like clients that I've worked with as well going into entrepreneurship is, on discovery calls, there's probably been red flags that I've ignored from certain clients in the beginning. And so just now I tend to recognize those things as I'm now in my 30s and more mature. I start
Yes.
to recognize those
Yes.
things, trust my gut when I have that feeling in my stomach. I immediately like stop and assess and ultimately make the right decision for me. But
Yeah.
I mean, my early 20s, I mean, you're just learning life and you're just getting out of high school, college. I mean, the truth is, you never really have it figured out. And we're all just learning as we go throughout our 20s and even 30s. Like, I'm still learning so much today. Like, you never really have it figured out.
Mhm.
And we're just all doing our best every single
Yeah.
day.
That's like the most reassuring thing that I've heard people say. Just because you're older doesn't mean that you have everything, your life figured out. And it's really hard when, nowadays everyone's on social media, most people are on Instagram, and then you see what you know is someone else's highlight reel that they wanted to share, but like in the moment, it's really hard to like distinguish that. And sometimes we'll just compare it to your life and be like,
Right.
well, maybe I should also have this all figured out like everyone else. Nobody has it all figured out. It's okay. You can take your
Right.
time. You can be at peace with yourself.
Yeah, it's very hard to do because I know in your early 20s, you're always like, by 30, I want to have XYZ and be in this place
Right.
in my life. But like, if you push too hard towards that goal, like you're only going to be more disappointed if things don't turn out exactly how you plan them to once you get there.
Right.
So just making sure you're a little bit flexible on those goals that you set earlier in life and know that things can pivot and change. Um, it's good to have goals, but I think,
Oh yeah,
like,
for sure.
pushing yourself too hard can sometimes make you miss out on some experiences in life.
Right. It does depend on the person, but overall, we've all experienced a variation of those feelings. If I look back through my 20s, I would do more crazy shit. I think I've been very timid
Right,
throughout my life, and I guess I would say like, had a more sheltered upbringing where like I was not encouraged to, do a lot of things that would be considered crazy or out of line. Or at least like that's like what I internalized. And
right.
so during my college years, for example, I never drank. And I was proud of it, except now when I look back, I mean, there are certain things that I wish that I was just doing a little bit more. Maybe I could have been more involved in like different student groups and would have met a lot more like friends and just people from all different walks. In my career, I think I could have. So I have some thoughts on like career wise. I used to think that my resume would dictate everything, right? And so having a linear or like a straightforward resume, like where you just progress within like the same, like your marketing manager, your senior marketing manager, like that to me was like what I had always strived for because I
Mhm.
wanted to like have my progression make sense. But then, throughout my 20s or especially like early and mid 20s, I navigated like I made so many lateral moves. First auditing and then going to recruiting, marketing, and now video. I think I've actually learned a lot more through this experience just by like the perspectives that I was able to take on. And so I guess looking back at my 20s, I would tell my younger self that it's okay that your career may not be like super linear,
Right.
because the experiences that you'll gain from it is going to be greater. Just like don't put that much pressure on how things should be
Right.
because things are changing all the time in your career. And yeah, I mean, also throughout the experience, you figure out what you're good at and what you enjoy doing more. Video has, been a constant thing that I've been enjoying for the past couple years. And then marketing, like I've always been really interested in marketing. And I just feel like I am at a much better place in my life now versus me just a few years ago.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, I thought my life was over at 30, but you know what? It's just beginning.
Yeah, that's right. It's just beginning. I also had a thought about entrepreneurship. I've always felt very entrepreneurial. I've always had so many different ideas on how I can like create services around things that I was like really good at and passionate about. But I am realizing that I looked at entrepreneurship in like the most motivational, like rosy glasses type.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's only the good stuff and none of the bad.
Yes. I will agree with you 100% because when I quit my corporate job, went into entrepreneurship, I thought this was going to solve all my problems. Like my anxiety was going to be completely gone. I wasn't going to have any of the problems that came with like a corporate job. But the truth is, there's just different problems that you're trying to solve now, right? There's
Right.
still stress, there's still anxiety, and everything is on you to figure out as an entrepreneur. Like, you have to go out there and find the mentors and network with people and build those relationships. Like, you don't have people in your corporate job to go to and, bounce ideas off of. You have to create that kind of community yourself as an entrepreneur, and it's freaking hard. Like, I don't think people realize how hard it is to, like, build your own business, and it is a lot of stress,
Right.
and I was definitely wrong in assuming that just because I was going to have my own business and dictate my own schedule, that everything was going to be, like you said, super rosy and, smiles and happiness every day, because that's just not the reality of it. There are a lot
Yeah.
of bad days still. There are a lot of
Yeah.
days when I doubt myself. And I think that just comes along with it. And it's just something some people should realize before they jump into it, right?
Right. Like have a more well-rounded, realistic expectation. How my perspective on it has changed is that it is kind of like a emotional roller coaster. Almost a year ago, I transitioned from like working full-time on my business to joining a video agency. And now I have a lot more structure in my days. And I find that to be a welcome relief
Mhm.
because it's just I realize sometimes I do actually like I can appreciate like that structure and knowing exactly which projects that I need to be working on.
I agree. And to be honest, there's been a lot of days where I have thought about that in the past of like just going back to a full time job. I mean, there's definitely, I feel like every entrepreneur has probably gone through that at one point or another. And just the truth is, like, you have to figure out what's right for you.
Mhm.
And just because you make one decision now doesn't mean that that has to be your decision forever. Like, you can always pivot and change and figure out what feels right for you at the moment. So
Right.
I think it's just figuring out what makes the most sense for you in this
Mhm.
exact moment.
I absolutely agree with what you just said. And then like along the lines of like this younger Crystal that you're talking to, or what do you think you would be like surprised by, or like she would be surprised by?
Starting my business, first of all, would be something that she would be really surprised by, because to be honest, I never grew up with like an entrepreneurial mindset. I never thought this was something that I would
Yeah.
want to do. Honestly, I didn't start thinking about it until, the last few years of my tech career, when I was completely burnt out. And really, that is what made the decision, is like me being at my wits' end, mental health, in the shitter. Can I say that? But my mental health
I've already said
was
shit at least once, so
yeah. So, I mean, that really just sparked me to finally change my life around. And I think she'd be really surprised by that. But also just being able to say no to things now that
yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily do in my early 20s, even
Mhm.
like um overextending myself with like doing things with friends, or you know that, or business wise, like in personal and business life, just
Right. Just
being
challenging
okay
yourself.
saying no,
Mm.
and like realizing that no is a complete answer, right? You don't always have to defend every single decision you're making,
Mhm.
right? You can just
Yeah.
say no, and that's okay. And I
So,
think the right people will like respect that, right?
yeah. I think so. I just wanted to wrap up this episode by first thanking you joining me and talking about all these fun marketing, business subjects. I think it was really fun to like also just reflect on your journey and like thinking back to like lessons that you learned throughout the way. I wanted to leave some room for you to plug what you offer and how someone can find you.
So, like I said, I own an ads agency, Soulwave Digital, which you can find at soulwavedigital.com. We offer done for you ads management services. We also offer website optimization to generate more sales to your website, and then one on one consulting. So, you can find me at Krystal_Childrey on Instagram. So, if you want to send me a DM, you can do that right there on Instagram, and looking
Cool.
forward to chatting with you all.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode. I hope you enjoyed. And if you're interested in more, make sure you're subscribed on whichever podcast platform you are listening to this on. And also make sure to follow our Instagram handle. It's on the cusp of 30. Okay, bye.